welcome to today's episode. I am so happy to be joined by my special guest, Joe McQuillen. And I connected with Joe through my connection with Mary Helen Hensley, who I met last November. And through that connection, I met her good friend, Lisa Hagan, and she is a literary agent. And anyway, many different synchronicities have happened that I ended up listening to a podcast with Joe and heard his story. And I was walking on my favorite walk, which is by the canal, one of my favorite walks. And I had my earphones in and I was listening to Joe speak on this podcast. And you were talking about your son, which we're going to be talking about today.
Yeah.
And I had tears just running down my eyes listening to what you were saying, because it just touched like a very deep part of me because of my own experience with my mom passing away. And just your whole experience with your son and the journey that you're on today. I'm so honored to have you on this podcast, and I'm so happy that you've taken the time to share this journey with us.
Well, I'm honored and humbled to be here, and I appreciate it. And there is nothing more important in my life than other than my wife and kids, than spreading the message from my son who's on the other side.
Yeah. So take us back to what happened back in 2016 with your son, Christopher.
Well, in 2000, the spring break or Christmas break of December 2015, January 16, my son was home from college, and the last hurrah, the last weekend before they were all going back to school after New Year's, a dozen of them went up to a friend's lake house in Wisconsin, and kicking up their heels, and Sally and I were actually my wife Sally and I were actually pretty relieved they were going to do that instead of running around in the city. They were going to be in this bucolic setting on a lake, big beautiful home, so how much trouble could they get in? They went to a local pub, shooting pool, drinking too much, went back to the lake house, continued the antics. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, my son and three of his friends, one who we knew pretty well, went outside and stumbled on a boathouse. And in the boathouse were some canoes. So four of them jumped in a three-man canoe with a snoot full of demon rum and layered clothing, because it was January in the Chicago area. And it was cold, and untied Timberland boots, which literally did end up playing a part in all of this, all the clothes. It was a perfect storm, half frozen lake. And they went out on a lark and paddled out, and none of them made it back. The following morning, I had gotten up at 3 o'clock in the morning with some kind of crazy dream, but it had nothing to do with Chris, but I couldn't shake it. It was a bad dream. And I shook it off, or tried to, and was waiting for Chris to come home so we could watch a football game. I have a dish so I can get the hometown Buffalo Bills game, and there was an opportunity for us to watch it together with his little brother Will. And I get a call or a text that said, "Mr. McHugh, Chris and three of his friends are missing." So I grabbed the dog, jumped in the Jeep, headed up to Wisconsin, and halfway up, about an hour and a half ride, halfway up, I get a call that said it's no longer a search, but a recovery, that all four had drowned. And that started the journey. I had to go up and all the details, all the details of, claiming the body and getting it back from Wisconsin across state lines, all those things.
Yeah.
Were daunting, and they wouldn't let me see my boy's body. I'd have to claim him off of a picture, but it was him. His clothing, the Celtic cross. It was my boy.
Yeah.
And at that point, I knew that I wasn't ready to face a world devoid of my son.
Yeah.
And if there was something, be it heaven, whatever, on the other side, and he was there, I needed to try to connect with him. 16 years before, I had stumbled onto a medium through some lark, I don't know, and it wasn't. It was, I think it was preordained, but she gave me a reading, and it was kind of mundane, Ainsley. It was, your grandmother's here, says you should sing more. And it's like, okay, great. We're on the clock.
Yeah.
Let's get moving here. And
Yeah.
she, and at the end of it, she said, your dad's here. And he's holding a caboose, and he said to tell you railroad. Now you gotta understand, we were a railroad family. My dad spent 40 years on the railroad. Every boy, there were 5 of us in the family, all worked on the railroad in college. We all had railroad jobs. And we were railroad. If you look over my shoulder, there's a railroad lantern on the top of that bookshelf. And that's that cold steel, kind of who we were. And I had been on cabooses with my old man, and I would spend the night when he was the yard master on the railroad tower just to be able to spend time, because he'd work 16 hours a day to raise 10 kids. So when she told me this, it was amazing. Now you got to understand that my dad left in the mid 70s, which was early, but not that early. And so I didn't feel the sense of urgency to connect with him. It was just nice to know that he was there. He didn't give me the answers to the universe, didn't anything. He just let me know he was there. So 16 years later, fast forward, you got to remember, this is before Google searches. And my old man was just a common blue collar guy, So there was nothing anywhere that this could be looked up. And so 16 years later, when Chris crossed over, I remembered, I had put that in my memory bank, that my old man is somewhere on the other side, somewhere in heaven, utopia, whatever you call it. And if he's there and Chris is there, I guarantee the old man's with him. And I just got to connect the dots and find him. And that's what started my search.
Yeah. So after obviously the funeral and the whole, like, I'm sure that's just like a shock, like that you're, like, what was that like for you? Like, was that surreal, or, how did
I was like operating, it was very much a shock, like a dream, you're in shock, very honestly, but I'm also programmed to get things done. That's who I am, so, there was funerals and medical reports and ceremonies and graves and gravestones and all these things that had to get done. And Christopher's godfather, my pal Michael, was with me the entire week, which was amazing. But I will tell you, for the first 3 nights I'd go home, or the first 2 nights I'd go home, and I'd finish with all these chores, which were amazing amount of detail and work, and I would get on my knees. And I've been sober now 34 years, so it's time, 20 some years and 30 years and 29 years, or 31 years. And I would get on my knees every night, and I would say, thanks for my family, thanks for keeping me sober, right? And go to bed. Well, these nights I got on my knees and I said, look, thanks for keeping me sober, thanks for my family, but we're not good, you and I. You took my kid. And on the 3rd night, I went through this and said, I'm PO'd at you. You took my kid. And I laid down, and I got actually a message. It's probably the second time in my life I got a download from God. And he said, I didn't take your son. His recklessness and free will caused him to cross early, and I welcomed him. But remember, I lost a son too.
Yeah.
At that point, I knew that God wasn't a chess master moving pieces around. Where I was, he wasn't making me pay for my past sins.
Yeah.
That this happened. And free will is a big part of something we learned from the very beginning, and that's why Christopher crossed over, And at that point, I knew that he was the reason I was able to put left foot, right foot to get all these events done when I was operating, purely on instinct at that point.
Yeah.
And so God was no longer the protagonist in this story, that he was my ally, and my son was with him, and that was good.
Yeah. And that's a huge turning point, isn't it, for your own healing and your own understanding of this,
huge.
Because it makes no sense to you, like, why this would happen. So it's
right.
That to me is a very positive thing, to be able to have that shift in your perspective.
And you know what, I'm Irish, Ainsley. So we Ainsley, we went around with a chip on our shoulder to begin with. And so I'm thinking, wow, I'm gonna spend my life PO'd at God, And
I know.
all of a sudden I wasn't mad at God. God, and as a matter of fact, because I realized that he had taken an active role in keeping me up when I needed to do the things I needed to do, that my relationship with God became even closer.
Yeah. Yeah. I have this similar experience with my own journey with my own mom. And yeah, like for me, I suppose it's different because the parent-child, mother-child relationship is obviously a different experience. But I think the closeness and the love, I think we definitely share that with you, with Christopher, me with my mom, and I think it
Yeah, they're
has been for me.
soulmates. You know,
Soulmates, yeah,
soulmates aren't romantic.
no,
This isn't a Hallmark movie, right?
yeah,
Soulmates are people who are connected in the soul. Christopher and I believe, were twin flames, which,
hmm,
I'm going into in the second book.
yeah,
And my sister Marcia, who I just adored, she was Christopher's godmother, and she passed away last January. And she told me, she brought me so much love and stability in my life, because as a wild kid, she was one of my older sisters. I'd run to her for help, and her,
yeah,
my brother Jerry. And she said to me, and I could never pay her back for all the support and love she'd given me. And she was Christopher's godmother, and they adored each other.
mm,
And she said to me, Joey, she always called me Joey. She said, when she was at her deathbed, she said, "You gave me the greatest gift. I read your book, and I'm not afraid to die now."
oh, that's
And
beautiful.
I've subsequently been in touch with a number of mediums, and Christopher, and Marcia's with him,
Yeah,
and we've had connections through people, and I'm hoping at some point Marcia will be able to come directly to me.
yeah, that's so wonderful that you were able to give her that gift, because I think, and the book that I'm working on right now, which is my first book, so you're a professional now at this stage, working on your second book.
Yeah, I'm a real pro.
I'm a newbie to this, but yeah, it's my book is called Moving from Fear to Trust, which is my
I love it.
journey. Yeah, which is my journey of my own healing journey before any of this happened. My own connection with my mom from the first line of the book, which I'll share with you, is I know you from before, which is what she said to me, was her first thought when I was born.
Wow.
When I looked into her eyes, she just was like, "Oh, I know you from before."
Wow.
And she said she never had that with anyone. So
Yeah.
it's both of our journey together, and then her passing, and then what I've learned since, and the journey that brings me up to here today talking to you, and continuing to move, because to me the fear is like the connection is gone. I can no longer be with her. I'm shut off from her. And I remember when I met Mary Helen, she was saying, it's, and even from listening to you, actually being able to open to her and receive her communication, even though I'm not with her physically. And just one very, very, very strong dream I had, where I was searching in the house for her, and I went into this bathroom, and she was in a bath, but she was submerged in the water, but I couldn't see her face, but I knew it was her. And she spoke to me, but it was like she was speaking not in the room, but like through me. It's like through my mind. I could hear her voice, and she just said, "You can't connect me anymore in form, only in my formlessness." And then I woke up, and it was like, oh, and a part of me kind of healed even hearing that, because again, it was like I could let go of my attachment to her physically, but not let go of my attachment and my connection to her. It was like in a different way. It's like she's can be all in all places, but that's obviously, I don't feel her constantly, but I feel her presence,
I know when Chris is
when it
around.
wants to come in. Yeah.
I know when Chris is around. I can feel when Chris is around. I went and saw John Holland, a lovely medium, at this group at Wilmette Theater. He flew in. I think he's originally from Boston, but wherever he lives. But he came in, sold out. And last time he was there, Chris came screaming through. So he was there, and I felt Chris all over the back of my neck. John pointed out and said something about writing a book and pointed to me. And I was a little disturbed initially, because I said, wait a minute, Chris is there. Why didn't he? And then he called on this lovely family whose daughter left earlier, who had some developmental issues that I knew about. And it was wonderful. And I also thought, oh my God, he's afraid that anybody would think who'd been here before that we're stacking the deck, because he knows me and he knows my story. But I was there, and I could just feel him completely. For me, it's a chill around the back of my neck that says he's there. Then I feel, it's almost like this warmth I can feel knowing he is there. I was at the grave yesterday, and your listeners got to understand that I'm not some old guy sitting on a bench feeding pigeons, right? I'm an old guy sitting in a grave
No.
smoking a cigar with my Labrador
Yeah.
and talking to my boy, and I clean up his stone and I make sure everything's good shape. And then we talk, and I felt him all over me yesterday. I don't always feel that. I mean, there's times he's not there. He's not at my beck and call, although he's with me often.
Yeah.
Right? I had a golf outing. We do a charity outing for two wonderful causes that he was involved in. One was young adults with disabilities who do theater, and he was working on being a special ed instructor, and there's a scholarship in his name. And the other is in Balance Ranch Academy for boys 14 to 18 with addiction, and I'm on their board now. Right, I go out there once a year to their fundraiser, and then it's just me and the boys, 40 boys, talk for an hour, and that's probably one of my favorite hours of the year, because I see my son in every one of those boys, you know. But I those are the times when I'm walking. That ranch is a thin place. He's right there. Oh my God, the energy that I feel is substantial, and I think people got to open up to say, well, I think I felt this, or I said, you know, open up, be open and claim it. You know what I mean? Claim if your loved one's giving you a connection, that's special. You know, raise your hand, claim it, man. And if anybody else doesn't get it, who cares?
Yeah.
We're all going there, and we're all going to the other side. We might as well get used to it.
But this is something that we touched upon before we started recording, which is sometimes when the best conversations happen before we record. And you were just saying how both of us kind of have a gift of like not really caring what people think. So we're kind of lucky in that regard. That So can you talk about like your kind of background, how you're able to just put this out there and and just claim it?
come from. I mean, we have very close. I'm originally from Buffalo, New York, and we had 10 kids, and it's actually a result of a car accident where two cousins were blended together. My old man and mom took in 5 cousins, said they're ours, you know, and they're the same name, and you know, so close genetically that nothing was ever done with the state. We just had 10 kids, and that's who they are. And my brother Paul, who's technically my cousin, is my brother. You know what I mean? And I never knew any better. That's how he was raised. So we all had this going on. Plus, there were 10 of us. You know, plus we were like the Clampetts moving into the suburbs. You know, you're not from here, but you know, a bunch of hooligans coming in, and the neighbors just hated us. And so we just always circled the wagons, and all we care about is the inner circle. You know, and we were fiercely loyal, and we still are. You know, I had a book signing in Buffalo, and the whole family showed up. It was just amazing. But there's a great line that I quoted. It said, "The unassailable self-confidence that comes from a childhood insulated with love." So as dysfunctional as my upbringing was, I knew I was loved. So that enabled, and my kids know they're loved. Christopher knew he was loved. Even when he was acting inappropriately, he knew he was loved. You know, that was never in question. So that allows me to write a book that's a little off the beaten path. And if somebody, this isn't for you, then, you know, go listen to another podcast, move on. I don't care. I'm not trying to convince you anything. This isn't a club.
I know.
You know, there's no dues. You know, I'm just trying to bring a little bit of peace and awareness to people who've lost kids or loved ones. It doesn't have to be kids, like you and your mom. People.
Well, I found so much solace, but it's like, I mean, just take us back to, so you started, I know you were saying that you were going to mediums, and you obviously weren't planning on writing a book. You were just kind of in the midst of your experience. Like, when did it come into your awareness, okay, this is actually going to be a book? Like, when did that
That's a fabulous question. And what happened was, I started seeing mediums on the phone originally, then in person right away. I mean, months in. You know, initially contact with the medium on phone, with the medium that brought my dad through 15 years before she moved to Arizona. I still have her contact number. She did a reading, told me things that didn't come through until I got the medical report. So, I mean, very, very accurate. But I wanted to see somebody in person. So I saw this guy, Andrew Anderson, and we're still friends. And he was amazing. And the minute I got there, before I got there, I had moved him from one grave over from the other, which was kind of funny. It was done, we buried him in the winter. And so the woman who, you know, selling us the plots, who didn't really like being outside, didn't tell us that we bought 6 plots for my buddy and I. Didn't tell us that he was being buried right next to another couple. So when the snow melted, it looked like he was their kid, and I was livid. So I had to move over one spot, and now I'll occupy the spot he was in, so I don't want anyone else there.
Yeah.
And I'm really content. I'm so happy I did that,
Yeah.
So, so I went to see this guy, Andrew Anderson. On the way out, I stopped at his grave, which I do often. And because we had moved him over, the dirt was loose, and this was, middle of June, June 30th, actually, morning, June 30th. And so I took some shamrock seeds I had ordered from Amazon and was spreading, was digging them around and planting them around the loose part of his grave, around it. And then I picked up this out of my jewelry box. I grabbed this leather bracelet that said Dad, and it was from Disney World. That when Chris was 4 or 5 years old, he picked it out and had his mom give it to me from him. So I put that on. I went to see Andrew. The first thing he said to me is, Chris is here. He looks like Brad Pitt. He's gorgeous. He said, he acknowledges you're wearing a bracelet he gave you, and he acknowledges you planted something in his grave this morning. It was like, we were 5 minutes in, and this guy just knocked me off my seat,
Yeah.
And it continued to be like that, and it continues to be like that to this day. The only thing is that there's not as much wonder because I now expect the miracles, right? I expect those.
Yeah.
And so, that started this journey. So I started taking these copious notes, pretty good term for a guy with 2 years college. And I started taking these copious notes about all these meetings. Then I started recording them on the phone, right? And so I would get home and I'd dictate those, or play those back and write them down, and I would put them in a folder according to the date. And I just assumed someday I was going to be old, sitting on a porch in a rocking chair, and I would have these notes, these memories to look back on and make me feel close. That was my plan, right? And the Greeks always say that man plans and God's laugh. And
I was going to say God's plan is like, no, that's not what's happening.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So now it's a year after. It's February of 2017, and I've been keeping these notes for over a year. And I sat upstairs. My brother-in-law was over talking to my wife, Sal, and she was describing how tenacious Chris was when he used to play hide and seek when he was a little kid. He'd play hide and seek, he'd hide in the closet, he'd hide under a laundry basket, and he'd say, hide, and you'd find him, and he'd go, hide again. And he's 2 or 3 years old, and he'd go, take off, and you'd find him, he goes, hide again. And that voice rang in my ear as she was describing the story. And it was like, oh my God, this is, he wants me to find him. And the next morning I started writing the book, and I realized I was keeping those notes, not for me, Aislinn, but for you.
Yeah.
That's why I was keeping them. And to this day, that's every meeting we have, I connect with Chris, and I write the spirit writing, and I write it down and I edit it and put it in the folder according to the date. And when I meet with Andrew or Sherry Jewell or Thomas John or Tony Russo, who just an amazing medium, I record those, write them down, and put them in because I think this journey's not over. I'm doing a second book, so for me it was something that I was selfishly trying to hoard, but for Chris it was a story to get out there for people who are hurting and need to know that the journey's not over and the connection's not done.
Yeah, it's amazing that the work that you're doing together, kind of hand in hand, and like the name of the book, Searching for Christopher on the Other Side, which is just so beautiful because it really is. It's kind of like opening to your own journey with that person. Do you know, it's like, because as you say, it's not just something that is handed to you. It's like you have to go on this quest.
Every stroke, every keystroke, every paragraph, Christopher was there. And when I would get down, which, to this day, it's 3.5 years, this day, it's, sometimes the grief just knocks me over like a tsunami. And I let the wave pass by and I cry and I feel sorry for myself. And I get on with what I need to do. And then it ebbs and I start over again. There's a great line from a movie called Manchester by the Sea. And it was a Academy Award-winning movie, and the woman lost some kids. And she said, my heart was broken, it'll always be broken. And that's what I think people who've lost loved ones need to know, specifically kids, is that your heart will never heal. You'll acquire tools to allow you to function and have moments of pure joy and elation and fun, and you can be productive and all of that stuff. But you're going to do that with a broken heart. You know, if you're waiting for your heart to heal, give up that dog. It's not going to happen. That dog's not going to hunt. You know.
Yeah.
But you can't dwell in that and let it take you down. You know.
Yeah.
So when those moments would hit, Christopher would literally, through mediums and through our spirit writing, would say, Pop, you got to get out of yourself. You got to help people. You can't dog it. You know. You need to get going. You know. So I felt pushed by the spirit of my son, so that I didn't waste time, effort, energy when there was work to do. You know. So, you know, how do you deny the existence of that? You can't. You can't.
Yeah, you just can't, no, because it's so real. But it's like, how did you? Because this is something that really stood out to me, was the channeled writing.
Yes.
And was this recommended by mediums, or was this something that you discovered on your own?
No, it was an accident.
Yeah,
amazing. I would. It started that I would get up in the middle of the night. You know, as you get older, you get up in the middle of the night anyhow. You know, so I'd get up in the middle of the night at around 3 o'clock consistently, and I would go in my office, which I'm sitting in right now, which was Christopher's bedroom. So his spirit really moves freely in here, and it was a happy spot. And I would light sage. I would align my chakra. I would do meditation music. All of it just to feel a connection to him, which I felt close here. That's all I knew, you know, for the first however months. And then on the anniversary of his crossing, so it was morning of January 3rd, 2017, I went through the whole routine, and on my desk was a Staples, just a plain white Staples legal pad, and a big Velocity pen that I had gotten from just a plastic pen from Andrew to Spirit Writing. And all of a sudden I started getting messages, and I had no idea what this was. I picked a pen and started writing messages I was getting as if it was being dictated to me. And it was like, hi, Pop, you're not going to believe it. The colors, you know, it's warm. It's always beautiful. Air is always warm, but it's air and love. It's called love air. And you're not going to understand until you cross over what that means. And, 2 or 3 pages of this, and then he said, gotta go, love you. And it was like, what the heck just happened here? And so I wasn't sure. I had no exposure to this. So I didn't know if maybe this was just my grief giving me a way to put a Band-Aid on that. And so I meditated, I prayed, I showed it to Andrew Anderson, I showed it to Thomas John, and a couple of really well-known mediums who said, oh no, that's just Chris. That's how he communicates with you. You're clairaudient. You're going to do it. So just keep that going. And so I continued to do it, and still wasn't really sure that it wasn't me. Now, here's what really woke me up to the fact that it wasn't me.
Yeah,
is the very first download he gave me. He said to me, don't be mad at Scotty. He was just being him. I loved him and he loved me. And Scotty was the kid whose parents owned this lake house, And yeah, of course I was a little PO'd. They left a bunch of drunken, 20-year-olds run around with no supervision, with unlocked boathouse. Now, the truth of the matter is it could have been anywhere. It could have been at my house, Yeah. But I needed to be mad at somebody, and God wouldn't let me be mad at him, so I was going to be mad at these people. So he told me, you got to let that go, Pop. And I'm thinking, sure, Chris, for you, I'll let it go. And besides, when am I ever going to see this kid again, right? I mean, So the next day, 12 hours later, fast forward to the 13th, I get a text from some of his friends. This is the anniversary of his crossing now. I get a text from his college friends saying, Mr. McHugh, can you meet us at the grave around 3:30? Now, Sally and I were going to go a little later in the day, around sunset. I said, sure. I took the day off. I'll come. Well, I get out there, there's like 60 kids. They kept showing up. There were 10, then 20, then all these college and high school and grammar school friends. Just somehow they started connecting with each other, and they all met at this grave. And it was just, I called Sally, I go, you got to get here. And all of a sudden there's Scotty, who was a childhood friend and a good boy. and his eyes were full of tears and regret, and so were mine. And I hugged him and I told him I loved him. Now, could you imagine that my son was preparing me for that connection? Otherwise, I would have walked in and been completely shocked and maybe abrupt, and maybe I would have added more pain to this kid's life. And because it wasn't his fault. These are 21-year-old kids doing reckless stuff just like I did. So it was nobody's fault. It just happened. It was just, like I said, a perfect storm. So that's how I wanted to hold on to that resentment, Aisling. I wanted that. That fueled me. That kept me going. And he told me I couldn't. And then bam, here's the subject of that. So another thing that we had wrote in the first few months, he had said, I know this scares you, Pop, getting this close to the other side. And I thought, what are you talking about? Absolutely not. No, this doesn't scare me at all. The only thing that scares me is the lack of a connection.
Yeah.
So here's the crazy thing is I felt, and I know that him being wrong, I mean, they're not omnipresent. They're not God, right? They're spirits who crossed over. They're all part of God, I believe. But he was wrong. I'm not afraid. But him being wrong was very validating to me. Because if I'm making this up, why would I write something that I know is wrong, right? So to me, it's a convoluted way to get to the point that him being wrong about how I felt about this was validating that it was coming from somebody else other than me. He said at one point, we get a kick out of you here, Pop. And I'm thinking, who's we? Is it friends? Is it kids who crossed, my family? And if it was me, if this were coming from me, I would have known who he was, right? I would have known.
Yeah.
To this day, I can't wait when I cross over. I'm going to go, by the way, Chris, who's we?
Who are all these people? Who are you talking about?
They get a kick out of me. The subject of me amusing them, So,
Well,
so
that's actually,
I know.
that's really interesting that you've kind of given, I suppose, you've been able to receive that validation that it's like, it's not just coming from your own mind. And that's probably something that even listening to you, and I've listened to many podcasts now that you've been on, it's kind of given me a kind of strength in because this path is very off the beaten track, and it is very much the unknown, and it's almost like it's given me kind of strength to kind of just be like, yes, this is what you're doing, and it might sound strange to some people, but that's not really your business. You just have to keep doing it and keep showing up to it.
Wasn't it Wayne Dyer that used to say, other people's opinion of us are none of our business? And the funny thing is, I will say this, though. The veil is so thin right now. 70% of the population has had some sort of metaphysical experience. So it's rare that I find some, and I've had them on radio talk shows where people just adamantly don't buy in. And I'll say, you know what, dude, God bless you, move on. That's fine. But most people, when they're talking to you about this, are talking to you for a reason, because they've had some sort of exposure, So 70% of people have had some sort of experience, and all they want to be is validated. All they want somebody like me or you to say, dude, you're not losing your mind. This is real. How arrogant are we if we think this is the only world that we have?
I know. Yeah.
The greatest,
it would make no sense. It would make no sense because none.
One of the best definitions I know, there was a book, a movie called What Dreams May Come. And probably the clearest understanding I have to the other side is Cuba Gooding Jr. was playing a spirit guide, and he said, the origin of the word body is from the Anglo-Saxon bodic, meaning abode, which is what the physical body is, a transient dwelling for the real self. Like you're in your house now. Yeah. You're in your house. That doesn't mean you are your house. When your house falls down, you get up, you walk away. Yeah. And that's what happens, when this body fails, we get up and we walk away, and it's energy. And scientists will tell you that's how it works.
Yeah, but it's interesting because my mom, like her situation is she had basically she had a massive seizure, a grand mal seizure, and they couldn't stop it, so she was put into a medically induced coma. And so she stayed in a medically induced coma for 12 weeks altogether.
Oh, boy.
And so they could never stop the seizing. So every time they brought her out of the sedation, her brain still had seizure activity. So she was put back in. So I didn't have any contact with her as such. But actually, I met a lady who, through my friend anyway, so she ended up coming into my mom in the hospital. And she had a gift where she could communicate with somebody if they died or they maybe left their body somehow. So she was communicating with her and giving me messages. And the first thing my mom's first message to me was, will you forgive me if I can't come back? Because I think at that point she had known it wasn't possible for her to return. Her body was too damaged for her to come back into. But anyway, on the day that she passed away, so they take off the life support machine, and, you know, we're all surrounding her. My fiance Richie was playing music to her. You know, she's totally unconscious because she's still sedated. So I'm lying up beside her, and my auntie just puts on Spotify. Our mom's favorite music was ABBA. It was her happy music. So you know the way you put on shuffle, so random songs will go. So anyway, I had my hand on her heart, and you could hear, you know, she was still hooked up to the machine, so you could see her heart rate. And on the song I Have a Dream, her heart just started going weaker and weaker on the start of it, and she left on that song.
Right.
And then we were just like, you know, just, oh my gosh, like it was just, how did this, you know, I was just like so shocked that this happened. And because like the life force just goes, you know, the minute the heart just instantly gone. And I was like, and then the priest that came in after maybe a few moments was like, don't be sad, Martha has gone to the next dimension.
Right.
And I just thought that was just so strange that he said that, because it's not a typical thing that people say. And it was just like, anyway, it just felt like it was almost like my mom speaking. And when I went back then that night, I was staying with my fiance in a place across the way from the hospital, and we're listening back to the words of I Have a Dream. And I said, it was my mom chose that song.
Right.
And I said, she was unconscious. So there's so much more than what's happening just physically. Like that showed me, like she was able to reach us through choosing to go on this song. It just all lined up. And I was like,
made the choice.
You couldn't make that up.
No, you can't make it up. You know,
you couldn't make that up.
I got to, when I communicated with Chris at one point, not long after his godmother, my favorite sister, Marcia, crossed over. And she just loved us both unconditionally and just got a kick out of us and just protected us. And so when she crossed over, Christopher came through to me and said, you know, Marcia's here. He said, she crossed over. Because he said to me, Pop, don't worry. The minute she crossed over, I'll be there for her. He said, we were all here when she crossed over. And here's something interesting that I never thought about, Aisling. So that's why I know this isn't me. He said, then she had to go away somewhere because she had died of cancer and her body had been, you know, not functioning well for a number of years. Yeah. And he said, she had to go somewhere. Think of it as a spa. And when she came back to rejoin us, she was younger than even when I was a kid. This wasn't in my mind. You know, I didn't realize that you go to this spa, you go to this car wash where you heal. And then you come back and you join the family or your soul group, you know, which is oftentimes the family, but not always, you know. So that I had never thought that. This wasn't something that was on my radar. And so he when he came through, it's like, holy cow, that's amazing. So, you know, he said what happened is even though she had left her body behind, the trauma from the cancer still had a mark. So she had to go somewhere to heal, like a spa. Wow. You know, so I'm sure similar thing to your mom, that she had to go somewhere and you know, from the seizures and, you know, from the pain and the damage, that she had to go somewhere to revitalize. Yeah. And now what I'm told unsolicited by Andrew and some other mediums, that, you know, how young Marcia looks. I've showed pictures of Marcia with Christopher when he was a baby, and they said, you know, she's even younger than that, you know. Yeah. So she's in her prime, you know, which is what I believe we are when they appear to us, when they show us themselves in that form. You know, they don't come back as old, crippled people. They come back as people in their prime, you know, and that's just indicative. I don't think they run around in bodies. I know they don't. It's energy. Yeah. But
Yeah.
for us to understand it, it's got to be in a form that we can wrap our arms around.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is the next step for you? So obviously you have your first book is out.
Thank you for plugging this. My Search for Christopher on the Other Side. It's on Amazon. It's on Kindle. It's in print. It's an Audible. And the guy who does Audible it scared the heck out of me because I love listening to Audible. I learn better audibly. So I download books every day. That's what I do. And I drive in my commute. And the guy was just nailed it. I'm just so grateful. Somebody was just saying that to me the other day. And there's another really good podcast by a guy named Kevin Moore. Go on YouTube and look up. They call us channelers, and he's come to the United States just doing documentaries, hour-long documentaries on people who've channeled and spirits from the other side. And I was fortunate to be the very first one he did. I'm flattered.
Amazing.
And Chris and I, it's had 50,000 views. Now I'm not a big guy, but I think that's a lot. I don't know that much technology.
We'll put all the links anyway below the show notes for the podcast so everyone can check them out. And so what do you feel is your kind of the next chapter in your story, like yourself and Christopher, like your journey together? What does that entail?
This is my next chapter in my life. I mean, I have to make a living, which I'm fortunate enough to do pretty well, and so I'll continue to write. I'm writing another book called Now What, and it's a follow-up book because now what? Now that I know, and a lot of it's going to have a lot to do with thin places that we've talked about, that lovely Irish term, where the world is thinnest, where the wall is thinnest between the two worlds, and experiences that I've sought out. I mean, at first I was kind of a accidental tourist, and now I'm seeking this stuff out. So I'm writing a second book. I'm speaking to people. I love speaking to groups, especially people who've lost kids. That's my favorite. It's my favorite, the Q&A afterwards to bring some hope to some people. This weekend I'm going out to an All Souls weekend in Wisconsin where I'll speak and books are available to buy. So this is the whole process. We've just put a deal together. It's possibly somebody's looking at a movie with this. And all I care about is Christopher's story gets out there. That's what he wants. And there was nothing more important in my life when he was here than what he wanted. And there's nothing more important in my life when he's crossed over than what he wants. So, I'm just staying open and learning. I'm 3.5 years on this journey. I'm new at this, but I'm inspired and I'm in awe every day, about the signs and the comfort and the feelings that I get from him. So that's the next move. It's like a left foot, right foot,
Yeah, I love that. And now what is a totally perfect title for the next stage, isn't it? Because it is like, now what do I do with all of this? And
that's exactly,
I'm in this new world.
Holy cow! I've got this exposure. Now what do I do with it?
Yeah.
Well, like I said earlier, I'm just following the breadcrumbs.
Following the breadcrumbs. Yeah. So, what would you say to somebody listening? The whole kind of message that I'd like to leave them with is like, what would help them to move from fear to trust in what they're going through, whether they've lost a loved one or, even just the fear of death itself. What would you like to speak to that?
Well, I got to tell you, first of all, Christopher's told me in detail what it's like. And he said to me, Dad, your side is like boot camp. My side's like a beach bungalow in Maui. So, we're getting a lot of messages that the next round is pretty outstanding. I mean, the bottom line is I got a lot of work to do. I'm 62, so I'm on my, I'm rounding third at this point, but I'm in no hurry to go anywhere. I have work to do. But if good Lord touched me on the shoulder and said, time to go, kid, I'm good because I know what's next, right? And it's soothing and loving and it's outstanding. Yeah. And so, when that time comes, and then for people who've lost somebody, you gotta understand, they're still right here. They're here. They're a few feet away. They're a Chinese wall away from you. You just gotta do your part, right? If you're not getting cell connection, walk up on a hill and hold the phone up, right? Do your end to connect. Find people. Find channelers. Find mediums. Work on your own gifts. There's a book called Complete Idiot's Guide to Communicating with Spirits. One of the first books I picked up, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do whatever it takes.
Yeah.
So I can connect with my kid and I continue to walk this path that I've been given. I'm so grateful. But it went from a belief to a knowing. And now I know. And everybody out there has the ability to prove it to themselves so they can walk away knowing.
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. And let everyone know where they can find you and connect with you.
Okay, I have a website. It's mysearchforchristopher.com. But I have an email address. It's JB McQuillen, J as in Joseph, B as in boy, McQuillen @gmail. There's Facebook, of course. But, reach out, send me a message. Tell me what's going on in your life. You got a question? You need something that's going on, and it's very personal. This is a quest for me, and I'm grateful to do it. I believe, like in my recovery, where I work with other alcoholics, is that I believe I've given a gift, but I got to give it away to keep it. So questions, stories, just reach out. I'd be grateful to hear from you.
Wonderful. And we can stay updated with all your what's next and the new book. And hopefully, as you were speaking, I was visualizing a movie before you even said that. So I think definitely yourself and Christopher are here for a very special reason in the two worlds.
He's Shanghaied a lot of people. He's Shanghaied Lisa Hagen. He's Shanghaied you. He's Shanghaied. I think. Like I said, it's Chris's parade, and I just carry the tuba.
Yeah, wonderful. So thank you so much for
Thank
showing
you.
up to us, and thank you for being here today.
You're welcome. Talk to you soon.
So when you smile